The preoccupation with scale is a fool's errand. You cannot have scale without inclusion. Philanthropists cannot look for the solution and they can't be the solution, because the very reason that I'm sitting in this philanthropy chair, or that any philanthropist is sitting in the chair, is because we are part of the problem. If I am efficient as a philanthropist, I will spend quickly. Hi, I'm Raj Mariwala and I'm the director of Mariwala Health Initiative, which is an advocacy, capacity building and grant-making organization that works in India. MHI works towards making mental health accessible for historically marginalised communities. My favorite part about being a philanthropist in India is the exposure and the potential we have to work with, engage with collectives and activists that are building people's movements, and the flexibility that we have to providing resourcing or support towards these movements, because people's movements tend to get left out of traditional financing, development, traditional philanthropy. MHI's approach to philanthropy is to center the communities that we work with. So for example, it could be that we give grants to organizations or collectives that are run by persons from the community themselves. We give grants, or we look at work that is solely rights-based or justice-based. And I think at a third level, one really takes the approach that we are looking at systems change, and systems change does require time. So the best thing for a philanthropist would be to move aside, step aside, redistribute, and let people's movements do the hard work of social change. Something that I'm working on right now personally at MHI that I'm very keen on and very enthralled with is work that is at the intersection of climate justice, labor justice, mental health, and thus social justice, which is heat stress amongst those who work in informal labor. And I think that that's a very exciting thing for a couple of reasons. One is the team that's doing the research and talking to people on the ground is comprised of those who have the lived experience who've gone through this. And the second, I think, is what are the policy lessons that we can learn and push for from this, as well as reject some of the dominant narratives that are I think more prevalent around mental health at work, around climate change, etc. The reason that this is exciting is because the way we speak about climate change or mental health at work, it's spoken about in very uniform ways, in the sense that climate change affects everyone similarly, or mental health at work affects everyone similarly, and that's just not true. What does mental health at work look like for those who work in mines, or for those who work in national rural employment guarantee schemes? How I hold myself accountable as a donor is first to know and center who you are accountable to. And in MHI's case, it is the communities that we want to work with, as well as our partner organizations. The second would be to think about all the ways in which donors hold power, and then how would you continually modify the way in which you work to decenter the network of privileges and power that you may hold. The biggest growth I've seen, I think, for myself as a philanthropist in the last few years is shedding the idea, I think, of funding conservatively, and I mean that in terms of quantum of funding. Because the idea was always like, I can't spend the money down because I may need something for future years, etc. in keeping the organization going and keeping projects going. And I think I've hopefully managed to shed that mentality, because if I am efficient as a philanthropist, I will spend quickly. I've been lucky to have had exposure to have access to the discourse of, and to be part of feminist movements, radical political economist movements. And so I think I've learned a lot from there and applied it as we started MHI. But more importantly, there are, as I said, movements, so many movements in India that one can learn from. And I think the second thing which we have been lucky is that quite a few partners have very graciously and generously given their time to educate MHI on the work they do and how they do it, which is how we have built our understanding of mental health and of social justice. The clearest instance that I can relate of having to pivot MHI strategy was around a very big topic for MHI, which was suicide prevention. Less had been done in India up until that point. And once we set out to work some more in suicide prevention, fund suicide prevention work, we realized that there was no work to fund actually. So we had to pivot and put far more money into advocacy. But of course, that raises the question of, if we raise awareness, how do you do that ethically without having services in place? Then who builds capacity? How do you talk about suicide prevention without having services? And so we had to pivot a little more, in fact, and build capacity of social workers to do suicide prevention work. And it's still an ongoing project, and we are learning new things. Some of the values that we look at in our philanthropy is, one, build for the margins. And what we mean by that is, if you build systems for the margins, you will cover everyone. If you build for the center, you're never going to reach the margins. I think number two is always be aware of the power that you hold as a funder, and that's absolutely critical to the work that you do. And the third point is knowing that what you do is as important, or maybe even less important, than how you do it. It means you have to be reflective, it means you have to be responsive, and ideally be accessible in a variety of ways. So the one thing I'd suggest for my peers to practice, well, I'm going to actually sneak in two things, which is leave behind the preoccupation with scale, and don't think that you're going to be coming up with the solution.